In this video, we are going to be adding multiple enemies. So the first thing I'm going to do is scroll down to where my enemy image is. Underneath this line, where it says enemy image, I'm going to enter and write a comment that says variables for creating multiple enemies. So first off, I'm going to add another variable, which is called enemy image list. And I'm going to set that equal to an empty list. Now what we're going to end up doing is we're actually going to be setting up empty lists for each of these variables. So instead of having enemy X go to a random value between 0 and 450, I'm actually going to cut and paste that down here because I want to use it later. Same thing with this value, 0.5, and the 40. So I'm going to use those later, but right now I'm just going to set each of my variables equal to an enemy list, and then we're going to be using a for loop, sorry, not to an enemy list, to an empty list. We're going to be using a for loop to populate those lists. So right now, notice these four variables are the same. With the way we imported enemy image, I had to make a separate variable called enemy image list. If you were working in a normal Pygame from PyCharm or something, you wouldn't need to do that. You could keep this just as the enemy image. So the last variable I'm going to add to my list is num of enemies. And I'm going to make 6 enemies. So this number 6 is going to be used in our for loop, basically to populate our lists. So all of these different variables are set up. Now I'm just going to scroll down a little bit so I can see a little bit more. I'm going to set up a for loop. First we'll do a comment. This is a for loop to populate the enemy lists. So first off, we'll type for I in range num of enemies. Set off and enter. So everything should be tabbed in from here. So if you remember, there's the append method for lists, and that will add things to the list. So basically, with this for I in range 6, we're going to be adding 6 things to each of our lists. So first, we're going to do enemy, and I'm going to copy this just to save a little time. Dot append, and then we're going to do enemy image. So basically, I'm going to make a list of 6 of the same enemy images. So in my enemy image list, I will just basically have that picture 6 times. For the next part, we're going to do enemy X. So I'm going in order, enemy X dot append. And in here, we're going to use what we had before, which is our choosing a random integer between 0 and 450. So each of our 6 enemy images will be given a different random starting spot. My next one is pretty close to this, so I'm just going to cut and paste. So for the Y list, we want to pick a Y value between 50 and 150. And then I need to set up something for enemy X change and enemy Y change. Now these are going to be the same. So basically the only thing that's different between my enemies is their starting spots. So it doesn't look like I pasted that, but we can fix that there. So I'm going to append. And I'm just going to basically append with this 0.5 value. So all of them are going to have the same speed right now. Okay, I'm not picking a random speed. All of them are going to have the same Y change of 40 when they hit the side. So just to kind of check these lists, what I can do, for example, if I want to check and see what my different X values for my enemies are right now, I can, underneath this for loop, or actually in it, we'll try in it, I'm going to print enemy X. Okay, so I'm going to see the different random values that were chosen. So let's just try that. I tried that, it looks like up here, when I thought I didn't cut and paste, I didn't actually change this to enemy Y change. So let's just run the code again. And enemy Y change, list object is not callable. Basically because I did not append here, so dot append. So third time's a charm. Let's see if it works this time. Okay, so I have one more thing to fix, but what I wanted to show you was now I have all of these lists. So basically these are the different starting X locations. So my first one's going to start more towards the right, towards the middle, towards the right, really towards the right, and then we have one kind of more towards the middle and then one a little bit more towards the left. So that's what's going on there. So let's just check the error code. So I have something else from earlier in my code, and actually we're going to see this a bunch. Since I changed some things, right now I have lists, I have to go to the bottom of my code and start to make some changes. But we can get that idea of what's populating into the list from that piece. So we're going to head down towards the bottom of the program in the while loop to change different things there. So I'm going to take out this print statement first, because I don't really need that. I actually, when I was writing this initially, kind of printed different things at different times to see how things were working. Where we need to go down to first is our function. So basically, when we define this function now for enemy x comma y, we're going to need also an I value, okay, because we're going to need to specify showing each of our 6 images. So for now, what that's going to entail, enemy image, remember that this is now list, so we're going to use enemy image list and bracket off I. Okay, so this is going to pick one of my 6 enemies to show. When we call this function, we will use a for loop so that that all works. So going further down the page, we just kind of have to find anywhere that the enemy is taking place. So if I look through this, we're actually okay here with these 4. We'll take care of that further down in the program. We can leave these variables the same as we go through. So scrolling down. So here is our if statements with the enemy. So now for the movement, which is right here, we're going to have to enter a for loop. One other thing that I want to grab down here, and I'm not sure where you have it in your program because I typed this a little differently at a different time than what I worked with you with. I'm going to go down to where it says enemy x, and yours says enemy x plus enemy x change. I just kind of use a shortcut method there. I'm actually going to take that line, which is moving that enemy over, and I'm going to put it up here with my boundary checking. So this is the movement of all of the enemies. So we're going to run a for loop for all of this. So for I in range, and we could do 6, but we're doing num of enemies, because that way if I wanted to go back and set a different number of enemies, it would still work. So all of this needs to be indented. It's going to run in there. So basically, if I go through, enemy X is now a list, so I want to specify this to be the first, or the 0 through 5th enemy, technically, right, in the list. And all of these also need an I. So this is pretty much just putting in our I's. So this is going to happen for each of the enemies they're going to move over, okay? And then if any of them, a particular one, so when it's on the second enemy is position is less than or equal to 0 in the X direction, it's going to send it in the other direction. So I'll put an I here. And also it's going to take that same enemy, and this is why the list is so nice, because all of these different variables are connected by the index of the lists. So just a bunch of I's here. Same deal, when it gets to the other side, that particular enemy is going to turn around and it's going to go down. So just to reiterate, when I'm at a specific value of I, it's going to be checking this, in this loop, it's going to be checking all of these things and making all these conditions happen for the same enemy. So the next place that the enemy comes up is down in the collision because we have to check that. So first off, we're also going to run another for loop. And now for this collision function, and I do need to indent this all, right, because we want to check for a collision for each of the enemies each time. This is collision. We left our parameter the same, but now when we say what we want to use in our parameter, we're going to use checking each enemy. Okay, the bullet is just one bullet, so we don't have to put any eyes in there. And then I'm just checking through my next place I have my enemy is down here. And we'll talk about what's going on after I get these eyes in. So basically, if there's a collision right up here, and this is a collision with a specific enemy. So let's say the third enemy has a collision with the bullet goes back, score increases, and the third enemy, the one we're on, goes back up to a random position. So last little thing we need to do, if we come down here, in our calling that position of the enemy function, we need to specify the index of the enemy here. So it's going to move each of our 6 enemies to their new position there. So really it's kind of that same logic, but just thinking in lists to have each of these enemies happen in unison. Because I'm moving each of them, I do need that for loop here because it won't iterate through the list and move each enemy in succession. It won't really know what to do unless we set up this for loop. So that's same, and I probably could have copied this, and maybe you will want to copy it. And tab. Okay, so now I'm going to try to run the program. Running this program, hopefully this means I only have one error on line 156. So just to remind you, for I in range number enemies, and then I called my enemy function. When I changed my enemy function up at the top of the program, so once we get there, you remember I added a third parameter of I, so I just have to specify that down here. So X, Y, I, so basically all I really have to do down here when I call my function is put comma I, because I am going to use the value of I from the for loop. So I'm going to try it again, see if it runs. Okay, so here I am with all of these enemies. I did not shoot any bullets yet because I was kind of waiting till I got the screen recorder going. So basically, as you shoot the enemies, they are going to go back up to the top of the screen and go through. I can see my score increasing when any enemy is hit. Now, one of the kind of weird things about this, and I'm not really sure why, is sometimes I only get like 4 or 5 enemies. Every time I've checked this, it's basically because those random integers that were chosen for X were so close together. So maybe there's one enemy that's at like 100 and one's at 102. So they are really all there. Sometimes some of them disappear, and I haven't really come up with a good reason. I think it's mostly just like a glitch in the program or something. So if you see, I have one of my enemies that's heading towards the bottom of the screen. Here, basically, whenever that happens, we want to have game over, and that is something we're going to be working towards.